I am a 42-year-old man, and my wife is 40. Our 18-year-old son, who was studying at a prestigious military school at the time these events unfolded, has since graduated with honors, received his well-deserved rank, and is now serving his country with pride. My wife and I had been living together for a full 2 decades, a testament to our commitment and love. Believe it or not, we only argued and quarreled during the initial stages of our married life, as we adjusted to each other's quirks and habits. After that, we grew accustomed to one another, began to understand each other on a deeper level, and cultivated a strong sense of mutual respect in our family. And of course, trust. Without it, a relationship is impossible to sustain. Approximately 6 months ago, I started noticing subtle changes in my wife's behavior, particularly in the bedroom. She had become more active, more adventurous, and more willing to explore. While this newfound passion made me happy, it also made me cautious, as it was a significant departure from her usual demeanor. During one intimate night, my wife proposed trying something that she had previously been extremely opposed to, which greatly astonished me and set off a small alarm bell in my mind. Naturally, I decided to inquire as to why my wife had suddenly chosen to alter her long-held norms and rules, to which she responded with a casual shrug, saying that time passes, and she desires to try new things before it's too late. Her response, while plausible, did not entirely quell my suspicions. A weekend was approaching, and my dear friend had a birthday celebration coming up. He graciously invited my wife and me, as he always does. For some reason, my wife was not particularly enthusiastic about the invitation, which struck me as odd, given her usually social nature. On the day of the party, she began cleaning the house and cooking up a storm from the early morning hours, as if trying to find reasons to avoid the gathering. However, she couldn't outright refuse without raising more questions. She eventually relented and donned a beautiful form-fitting dress and alluring stockings, which surprised me once more, as she seldom wore such provocative attire. As the time for the party drew near, we called a taxi to take us to the venue. My wife, all made up and dressed to the nines, looked simply stunning, her beauty radiating from every pore. I was anticipating a flurry of compliments and admiration from my wife from friends and acquaintances, eager to show off the gorgeous woman I was lucky enough to call my own. Just as the car arrived, my wife suddenly yelped and dashed to the kitchen, claiming she had forgotten to turn off the pot of borscht simmering on the stove. She got stuck in the kitchen for what seemed like an eternity, as I called out to her, reminding her that the taxi was waiting. Eventually, she emerged, all smiles, and we left the apartment, ready to enjoy the evening. We had only driven about 300 meters when my wife abruptly announced that she hadn't actually turned off the borscht after all, having gotten distracted by something else. "You go ahead, and I'll quickly run back home, turn it off, and follow right behind you," she said, her voice a little too eager. We stopped the car, and she jumped out, her heels clicking on the pavement as she hurried back towards our building. At first, I agreed, thinking it would be a quick trip, and we drove on. But then a nagging thought crept into my mind. How could I arrive at the party without my stunning wife by my side? I wanted everyone to see the beautiful woman I had the privilege of being married to bask in the admiration and envy of others. And truth be told, I despise waiting. Waiting and catching up are the most unpleasant things in my book. So, I instructed the taxi driver to turn back, deciding we would return and pick up my wife, ensuring a grand entrance together. The driver obliged, mentioning that it would cost an extra 100 rubles for the detour. I agreed without hesitation, my focus solely on reuniting with my wife. We drove to the first intersection, the driver skillfully maneuvering the car around, and we raced back home, the anticipation building in my chest. I quickly ran up to the 3rd floor, my heart pounding as I opened the door and entered the hallway, calling out for my wife. No one answered, an eerie silence filling the space. Then, I noticed my wife's coat and her purse thrown haphazardly on the bed through the open bedroom door, as if she had been in a great hurry. I thought perhaps she had gone to the toilet or bathroom, tending to a last-minute need. But she wasn't there either. The room's empty and still. Growing increasingly concerned, I called her phone, only to hear the ringtone emanating from her purse, which lay abandoned on the bed. A sense of unease washed over me as I tried to make sense of the situation. Her personal belongings were here, but my wife was nowhere to be found. I ventured into the kitchen, just in case, hoping to find her there. The borscht sat on the stove, The gas turned off. No sign of my wife. I waited 5 minutes, then 10, then 20, each passing moment feeling like an eternity. The driver was already calling, urging me to return to the taxi. Resigned, I decided to go and let the taxi go, unsure of what to do next. I made my way down to the second floor, my mind reeling with possibilities, when a scene straight out of a movie or novel unfolded before my eyes. The door of one of the apartments opened, and out stepped my wife, accompanied by our young neighbor, a 27-year-old married man, his hand resting on the small of her back. For a few seconds, we stood in a silent tableau, shock and disbelief etched on my face, guilt and fear on theirs. Then, my wife, in a voice far too high-pitched to be natural, declared that she had simply gone to borrow some salt from the neighbor. I looked at her, taking in her disheveled hair, her smudged lipstick, her high-heeled shoes and stockings, and felt a wave of anger and betrayal wash over me. "So, you went and got the salt," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "But your hairstyle is a mess. Your lipstick is gone, and you're wearing those provocative shoes and stockings? And why would we need salt when we were just at the store together 2 days ago, and you bought it then? And where is this supposed salt you went for?" My wife started stammering something about iodized salt for her thyroid, but I was no longer listening, the lies falling flat in the face of the evidence before me. I turned on my heel, went downstairs, got into the waiting taxi, and drove off to my friend's birthday party, my heart heavy with the weight of my wife's betrayal. When I arrived, I told my friend that my wife had fallen ill and couldn't come, even though she had really wanted to, the lie burning my tongue as I spoke it. Throughout the evening, my wife called incessantly, but I didn't answer, too hurt and angry to speak to her. She didn't dare show up at the party, likely knowing the reception she would face. After the birthday celebration, I crashed at a nearby hotel, turning off my phone and sleeping until noon the next day, trying to escape the painful reality of my situation. In the evening, I finally returned home, steeling myself for the confrontation that awaited me. My wife greeted me at the door, her face etched with concern, and tried to kiss me, but I pulled away, unable to bear her touch. At this, my wife expressed extreme bewilderment, as if she had no idea what could possibly be wrong. She even had the audacity to ask questions like, "What happened? Why didn't you answer the phone? Where have you been for almost a day?" And so on, as if she were the victim in this scenario. I wanted to have a heart-to-heart talk with her, to give her a chance to come clean and tell me everything honestly, because I'm not some naive 16-year-old boy who can be easily deceived. But my wife continued to deny everything, even going so far as to proudly hand over her phone, encouraging me to check and make sure that she had no outside numbers, no evidence of her infidelity. "Okay," I said, my voice cold and hard. "I won't look at your phone. I'd better go to the neighbors for some salt." At this, my wife's facade crumbled, and she dissolved into a fit of hysterics, her sobs echoing through the apartment. But even at that moment, with the truth laid bare before us, she did not confess to anything, clinging to her lies like a lifeline. And when I moved towards the door, determined to confront the neighbor and get the answers I needed, she stood in my way, declaring that I would only be able to pass over her dead body, a last-ditch attempt to prevent the truth from coming out. But I was done with her games. I simply took my wife by the shoulders, lifted her off the floor, and moved her aside, my strength fueled by the depth of my pain and anger. She cried and fought, trying to keep me from leaving, but I managed to break free, escaping the suffocating confines of the apartment. I didn't go to the neighbors to have a lengthy conversation. I simply asked him how long the affair had been going on between him and my wife. I made it clear that if he didn't answer honestly, I would tell everything to his wife, exposing his infidelity and risking his own family, which included 2 young children, the youngest just a couple of months old. The truth, when it finally came out, was like a knife to the heart. The affair had been going on for almost 6 months, right under my nose, in my own home. I didn't want to know the sordid details, the specifics of their liaisons. I was already overwhelmed with hurt, bitterness, and a terrible, all-consuming anger. Part of me wanted to make a scene, to yell and scream at my wife, to demand answers and explanations. But I also knew that the details would only serve to deepen my wounds, to add salt to the gaping hole in my heart. After all, my wife's sudden interest in exploring new things in the bedroom, her adventurous streak, hadn't just appeared out of nowhere. I was certain she had first tried these things with her lover, this young father of two who had betrayed his own family. Looking back, I don't know how I managed to restrain myself from making a scene, from unleashing the full force of my fury and pain on my wife and her lover. Perhaps it was because my wife, in the face of her exposure, had become uncharacteristically quiet, retreating into herself. At first, she locked herself in the bathroom for hours, as if trying to wash away the evidence of her betrayal. Then, she sat in the kitchen, staring blankly at the wall, the weight of her actions crushing down on her. Finally, she lay down in the bedroom, practically unmoving, a shell of the woman I had once loved so deeply. I think if she had said even a single word in those moments, I would have exploded, unleashing a torrent of anger and hurt that had been building inside me. I'm sure I would have said a lot of terrible, hurtful things, words that could never be unsaid, wounds that could never fully heal. Of course, that night we slept separately, the chasm between us too wide to breach, the trust that had once been the foundation of our relationship shattered beyond repair. In the end, we got divorced, citing incompatibility as the official reason, a sterile term that didn't begin to encompass the depth of the betrayal and heartbreak that had torn us apart. My wife went to live with her cousin, leaving behind the home we had shared for so many years. The apartment, which had been my inheritance, was not subject to division, a small mercy in the face of the devastation of my marriage. As I sit here now, reflecting on the events that led to the end of my once happy marriage, I am filled with a profound sense of loss, anger, and disbelief. How could the woman I had loved and trusted for 2 decades throw away our life together for a fleeting affair with a married neighbor? How could she lie to me so easily, so convincingly, until the very end? These are questions I may never fully answer, wounds that may never fully heal. But I know that I must find a way to move forward, to rebuild my life and my sense of self, no matter how painful the journey may be. For now, I focus on my son, on being the best father I can be, and on finding hope and purpose in the face of this devastating betrayal.